Guys, it's a real honor to be with you this morning. I guess I just want to inspire us to mission readiness. Because, I just sat there on my sofa watching the TV, and you do. Now, I obviously was privileged to be in some situations where we could respond and we had those connections and we could go. But it's so easy just to go through life doing what we do, ticking the boxes, making church happen week by week. And do not get me wrong, that is absolutely vital and important. But sometimes we are blinkered to the sensitivity of what's going on around us, in the world around us. And there is a responsiveness that I see in Jesus Christ, which was phenomenal. He just made himself available to everyone. And he didn't have his perfect set that he was prepared to work with, or a set of people that had to get to a certain point before he felt they were right to work with. He literally said, "Come follow me." I mean, that was the bar. And it actually turned out to be quite a high bar, but there was a wide open entry level. And it's like, and I think that's just what God's stirring me at the moment, is do we have to get too hung up about who gets the right to follow Jesus or not? The Pharisees did a pretty good job on that. Jesus wasn't so hung up about that. But he said, "Follow me," and this, sorry if this is a bit controversial and not quite theologically correct, but I think Jesus was saying, "Follow me until you get so offended you stop."
Yes.
But if you do, you will walk with me from here until eternity. And I'm not sure who gets to judge who will get to follow and be in the line with Jesus, over that line. But I want to make sure that I am on that. I want to make sure that I am in that. And I would love other people to come with me on following him up until the point I get so offended I stop. Or I cross over, and because he did, people were following him for his miracles. And he was so savvy. He saw the fickleness of humanity. He didn't buy into celebrity whatsoever. And he goes, well, actually, if you do want to follow me, you just have to drink my blood, eat my flesh. He offended everyone. The crowds went right down. But he just kept on walking. He just kept on being him. He kept on going. And people did follow. And so we want to be about a people that are so following Jesus, it becomes so attractional that people just get added every day because we're people going somewhere. So we're not a kind of closed group that you join. We're an open class. It's like Forrest Gump. He said, "I'm going to run." And so people just started running with him. And he got these crowds. I love it. One day he said, "Right, I've done it." And they're like, "What? You can't, right? We gave our life to you. We gave our life to the cause to run the States." But there's a sense we want to be running, but we want to be mission ready. And my question is, what is it that God is sparking in you? What is it that God is sparking around you that you need to take notice of? And I want to encourage us in whatever front line we find ourselves in, whether that's ministry, whether it's you work in Tesco's, whether it's in your classroom, whether it's in finance, whatever area you are, what does the kingdom of heaven look like when it invades where I am? And we want to not do mission for God, we want to go on mission with God. And because I think sometimes he's doing more out there than he is on our side of the line. And we need to find where is the flow of God and to get into that, even if it ends up feeling quite disruptive or inconvenient. And actually, lots of his miracles, didn't they, happen when they were distractions. The best things were distractions. He's on the way to somewhere, and a woman cries out, touches the hem of his garment, or blind Bartimaeus cries out. It was a jolly inconvenience, but he was stopped in his track and he responded. Isn't it cool? Yeah. Lord, we want to be mission ready like Jesus. And we've talked about this crisis. Let me just share this. I love this. I read this over lockdown in this book about missional movements. This vision of church owning the lostness of an identified people in a defined place, ensuring that every man, woman, and child have repeated opportunities to see, hear, and experience the gospel in community, and then to respond to the good news of Jesus Christ. What a vision. What a vision. I'm like, yes, I want to commit to a place, to a people. Who is God calling you to? This community, these communities. We want to invest our lives, not for our own good, but for their good. And what I love about Jesus is that he gave regardless. He gave without strings attached. And we always put condition on the love of God. We say, we put conditions on the generosity of God. We say, well, that's not working because no one got saved. Stop showing love there because no one responded. Jesus healed 10, thank you, lepers. Only one came back to follow him. And I don't see Jesus getting knocked, angst, annoyed, going back to them, haranguing them. He is like just the generosity of heaven. Woo! Because resurrection life has landed and we are living in the good of it and we want to be generous with it. And it's up to individuals whether they will respond to that or not. We just need to keep extending, exuding the love of God without strings attached. So my friendships with my friends that I hang out at the pub or wherever, those relationships for me are not conditional on whether they'll end up getting saved or come to my next evangelistic meeting. I love them because I love them. Period. But what I know is that as I do, God is building a bridge that he can subtly and quietly walk over. But that's for him to do, not for me to do. Because it's working with God. And I think the church has been so hung up. And I remember the days when we had the evangelistic crusade in and they're like, invite your neighbors. Well, I didn't know my neighbors, but I felt compelled. So I would go and have a forced conversation with my neighbor, trying to be nice and chatty with them and like love them. Never known them, never cared about them before, but I've got a gospel mission coming up and you need to come. Just treat someone with dignity. And they're not just about getting scalps. This is about making disciples. It's about living in community. It's about loving people. It's about context. And in the context, we sow the gospel. Now, I say this in light that I know that you're having some amazing time and input with John Conrath. And I love John amazingly. And he is sharpening something among you. And I would say, get around John. Get that message. It's absolutely vital because I think the church, we have begun to catch the heart to serve, but we have lost the cutting edge of the message of the kingdom. And so we need both together. So don't hear what I'm not saying. But if you've just got this, it will be hollow. If you've just got this, it won't be true gospel. The two need to go hand in hand, and we need to work with what the Holy Spirit is doing. And it might be long term. And I know some of you have already, just through lockdown, begun to get to know and connect with people around you in new ways. And and it's amazing. And just as small groups, pray. Be praying for your connections, praying for God's love, praying for opportunities, and opportunities to pray for people. And so I just think this is a time to be said. Some people are saying the gospel's on decline. I don't think it is. I really don't think it is. And I think this is a time to be bold about what we have in God. To be generous like we've never been generous before. To push out, to be more present than we've ever been present before. To be available. And you see, over lockdown, I read an amazing book. I did a lot of things. I met David over lockdown, did all sorts of things over lockdown. And this book was by a non-Christian sociologist, historian, who couldn't work out why the Christian church grew so quickly in the first 3 centuries. So he's done his research. And he discovered that these little house churches had hospitality and an open tables right at their heart. Yeah. And you see, these communities were generous. And they would invite the stranger, they would invite the non-believer around the table. And over the table, we know what Jesus did at tables. He did so much of his ministry at tables over meals. In fact, you could say his whole ministry was going from one meal to another. But stuff happened around the table. And when we look at the early church in Acts 2, we see hospitality right of the heart there. And because there was no in or outness, you began to belong almost before you believe. And that was one of our big things in Cambridge in the early days, is like we want people to belong, where we're okay about people belonging before they believe. Because that's kind of how Jesus did it. Let's be honest, his disciples didn't believe, some of them, right up until after the resurrection. So at what point do we say you have to believe before you belong? Jesus wasn't hung up about having to believe before you belong. And actually, somewhere along that trajectory, Peter got a revelation that Jesus was the Son of God. So in Huntingdon, we've got a guy called Mick. He's blind. He was blinded through a industrial accident. And that's the worst kind of blindness, because you knew what it was to see. If you're blind, he tells me, if you're blind from birth, you know no difference. But if you're blinded through your life, it is crippling. And Mick's gone through suicidal attempts. Anyway, he ended up on Alpha. He's done 3 Alpha courses. And his whole thing was, if Jesus can heal me, I will believe. And we were like, oh, Mick, it's not like that. But you couldn't. But Les and Linda, so Les got saved on a Alpha course several times before that. And he's since got married, and him and Linda have just started loving Mick, and then Mick's friend Fiona, who came on Alpha and got saved. And they've just started going on holiday with them, having meals with them, praying with them, talking with them, and they've just started a small group that is at Mick's house. And on that first night, they were talking about Jesus. And that night, this was Mick's been hanging around for years. And we're like, we don't know if he's saved. Is he saved? Did he get saved? I don't know if he's saved. He's just him and Molly, his dog. They just come, they are. They belong, they're part of our community. That night, and we've been praying for Mick, that night, he said, guys, I now realize I've got it all wrong. It's not about what Jesus needs to do for me. It's about what Jesus has already done for me. And I realize I need to give my life. He's forgiven me. It's what happened at the cross. And so Les and Linda that night go, Grace, would you lead Mick in the Lord's Prayer, in the believer's prayer? And do you know what? It was so cool to see, Mick and Fiona last Sunday night in our worship night, just worshiping Jesus. And Mick goes with his dog Molly. He said, I just wanted to let you know that no one's going to leave here tonight unchanged by God. I thought, come on. And it's great. And then so he's connected with this whole blind community. And so him and Fiona are taking their blind friends off on a holiday. And Fiona goes, yeah, it's a bit like the blind leading the blind, and because she's heavily visually impaired. Somehow she runs our PA, but I don't know how. But anyway, and she's an amazing sound engineer. She needs help plugging it in, but she's incredible. And these gifts just come together, and God is doing stuff. And so at some point, some of those folks hanging around with you, don't get too stressed. If they're a bit quirky, a bit unclean, a bit annoying, a bit disruptive, generally it's okay. I mean, as long as it's legal. But maybe if it's unlegal, Jesus hanging around with some quite unsavory characters, but you don't know what God's doing in them. And we must not prejudge. And so I'm stirring us today to say, Lord, would you come and do something fresh? Open our eyes to what you're doing so we can flow with you. Amen. Is that a good place to have a break?
Yeah, take a 5-minute break.
Great.
Facilities, grab a drink if you find them.
Great.
Tim, thank you for inspiring us and creating a wonderful atmosphere for us to receive everything that you've got to share in this second half. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, great. I want to just share 5, and none of this is new. Like, it's not rocket science, but there are 5 things I just want to remind us about that could help us in being mission ready. And then I think what we're going to do is I just want to share a story of something that we found ourselves stumbling into in Cambridge, which I just want to share a bit of a story just as an encouragement of what God is going to do with you. And I just feel like God is getting you ready for I just think like you think you've done a lot, but there's so much more to come. Like, you are just not done yet. And it's like, to some extent, you feel like the boat has been in the harbour and you've been tinkling on things. There's been some changing of things. There's been some mending of things. There's just a sense of getting ready. There's been repositioning. People that some people have got off. Some new people have got on. It's been a bit weird, because it doesn't feel like we're sailing like we normally should be sailing. But I just feel today God's saying, it's okay, you've been in dock. And there are things that God has been doing under the surface, which he could only do in this season of being slightly parked, slightly docked. But I've got a sense that God's just saying, but don't worry, you're not docked forever, like that you're about to set sail. And it was almost like the calling charge is coming, like, get back on board. If you've been off the boat to do some provisions, get back on now, because we are about to sail. Like, the chapter you've been in is coming to an end, and it felt like there has been some dormancy or some weirdness to it. But God is saying, you are going to set sail. And I feel like the sails are beginning to be rehoisted. And what do you need to sail? You need wind. Come on. So Holy Spirit, we want to thank you for a fresh breath of your Spirit through this community, this church, through those represented here in groups across. Holy Spirit, breathe on us again. And it may be that some of you, in fact, I know, I was talking to Mike, just there's seasons that have come to an end and you're like, ooh, what's next? God's saying there is a what's next. Do not, when you get to the top of the escalators, don't stop. Carry on walking because you're at another level. But you just don't know what was on that level until you get off the top of the escalator. There's a habitat or there's a whatever. This is exciting. So whatever floats your boat. I don't know. So getting back to our metaphor, God is saying, raise the sails. and I'm putting fresh breath in. And we're going to be finishing at 11:30, but before that, we're going to pray. And I just believe that God is going to spark things. You're going to notice things. That there's new opportunities that today will be preparing and readying you for. And there's new life coming. There is new life coming. And actually, some of the things that you've been investing in, God's saying, do not stop investing in it because it's about to break through. There are other things that God's going to give you discernment on to say, yeah, it isn't working, and stop doing it because it isn't working. Save yourself energy. So there's been some pruning, there's been some stopping of things, and God says that's okay. So that church that we planted in 94, had phenomenal stuff, and we've actually closed it. So that we felt after 25 years, we had done what that was meant to have done. And we closed it. So I've planted churches, I've also closed things that I've started, and that's okay. And ending things, I mean, we like births, they're exciting, traumatic, but exciting. Blessed, Michael, they are good, but funerals are more difficult. But we need to celebrate. When a season is ended, celebrate. And therefore, a good Anglican friend of mine just said, Tim, when you close your church, when City Life Church closes, just make sure you have a party. And do you know what? That's what we did. Those of us that were left, because one of our visions was to invest into students to send them out to change the world. And my eldership team said, well, Tim, we've sown everyone out. And it's time to send ourselves out. And so we went away for a weekend. There was about 30 of us that went away for a weekend. And we had champagne, we had a party, we reflected, we thanked God for those 25 years. And then we just prayed, and they called it the supernova weekend, because I think that's when supernovas kind of disperse and they scatter out. And it's amazing. Like, those guys are now in leadership with Dave Smith in Kingsgate, Cambridge. Some of them are leading the Vineyard Church, involved with the leadership team in Vineyard. So we've blessed, and that's okay. And so being able to celebrate the end of things. Don't be harsh on yourself. Celebrate an end of a season. But God is opening up new things as well. So, thank you, Lord. Now shall we open I have to open the Bible. So, I just want to say, I was listening to the Bishop of Burnley the other week, Philip North, and he was talking about the urgency of the time that we're in. He said so we've talked about the Ukrainian crisis, but actually we're in our own crisis here in our nation, and we're on a crisis on the front of two things. We have a cost of living crisis right now. Prices up, wages are down, or wages aren't going up unless they're the same percentage of inflation. There's a 43% rise in defaulting rents and mortgages. Like this, we've got more people at food banks. It's like we're in a crisis right now. But he also said there's another crisis going on which society can't help, and that is a point of living crisis. Why? What's the point? We've been sold a lie that we can create happiness through our own self-generation. I can work towards a happy retirement. I can create a stunning body to land that most amazing relationship of my dreams. I can have objects and stuff that will make me feel so good. And then you get that stuff, and actually it doesn't feel so good. And I think our younger generation are working out quicker than us, Generation Xers and above, that's actually a bit of a lie. That actually doesn't work. And that a question why there's such a mental health crisis in that younger generation that's seeing the lie of it and asking, what's the point? And I believe the gospel is the only thing that can meet both.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this is why we have to be mission ready at the moment. And Jesus broke onto the scene in Luke chapter 14. And let's just turn there. Luke chapter 4. And we know it so well. And I just want to say that, and you know this, but Jesus was led into the wilderness by the Spirit. But he came out of the desert filled with the Spirit. Absolutely tanked in God. Absolute mission ready. And there's a point in the people you're working with and in our own lives where, I might have got this from John Conrath actually, where in our Christian life, we move from being one of the people that's in the healing line, needing to receive prayer, victim mentality, never quite making it, I need Jesus to heal me. There's a point in your Christian life when you swap positions from being in the healing line to being one of the ones that's praying for people in the healing line. And maturity is moving from being a consumer to becoming a producer. And everybody in Christ is a consumer. Now, actually, the truth is that I will always need to be in a healing line. My character, just life. So don't hear what I'm not saying in that. But fundamentally, there is a shift in my faith and I understand where I see myself in God, that in Christ, I have got something to give away.
Yes, that's right.
And we need to see all believers coming to that place where, we move from the healing line into the position of one of those that's ministering to those in the healing line. And at that point, your life begins to get exciting. And for Jesus, he moved from one season of life into a new period. And you see, he was confident about this message. And what was this message? On that day, he stood up and said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released." Right? See the faith of that. That the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of the Lord's favor has come. And I believe that we are moving into a time of God's favor where what we are involved with, we are seeing a new openness to ministering to the needs of our society in a way that we've never known before. And that there's a favor to be talking about Jesus like we've never done before as well. And I like how the New Living Translation says, it says to bring good news. Some of you say to proclaim good news. And I think it's about proclamation, but it's also about being the good news as well. And people will not believe the proclamation if they cannot see that you're being that good news. And people are looking at the story of our lives to see whether the story matches the message. If you kind of see what, is this authentic? Yeah. And people are crying out for something authentic. In fact, just talking to Mike over that little break, and he was just saying that he saw in a friend at school someone who was different. And people are looking for that authenticity of that thing in our lives. And so Jesus was, I believe, good news. Just in him being who he was good news. And he also proclaimed that good news. But I believe people believed that good news because they could see that he was good news. In fact, people wanted to be around him. And I dream of churches that fundamentally are exciting places to belong to. You know, I said, Lord, I want us to be, you know, the life of the city. I want us to be at the... If Eugene Peterson in Ephesians 1 says in the message, the church was never meant to be on the peripheral thing of it. It was always meant to be in the heart of things. And the church needs to be at the heart of the party. Jesus is the one that turns the water into the wine. He's the one that's in the center of things, saving the day, being that good news. And so I want us to be confident about this message. And this is what we're about. But secondly, we want to be responsive. And we just see how Jesus was just moved with compassion. Matthew 9:36. But when Jesus saw the multitudes, he was moved. That word moved, there was a heart, there was a guttural wrench. Oh God. And I guess that's what I touched when I was in those 400 bed dormitories, sitting with displaced people. I've come back with a new heart for the displaced and just moved in a fresh way and moved with compassion. It might be for the young people in your community. It might be for a colleague at work. It might be, where is God? And are we so cold? Have we become so religious, so holy, that we have lost our compassion that breaks us? And with compassion for them, because they were weary and they were scattered like sheep, having no shepherd. Some of you, God has put a pastoral heart on you, and God just says, just don't limit to pastoring the church. As someone once said, start pastoring the phone book. So don't just take your church membership to pastor. Have that list for sure. Make sure you do. But then go and get the phone. Back in the day when you had the phone book, go and start caring about those names as well. And because your pastoral gifting isn't just meant for the church. Jesus was a shepherd to the broken and the lost and the least. And you see, your gifting, whether you're evangelistic, apostolic, prophetic, whether you're a teacher, an instructor, a pastor, those giftings have got the place outside of the church as much as inside the church. Some of you just start things. You connect people together in communities. So one of my sidelines, I chair a junior football club. We've got 28 teams in Cambridge, and I'm the chair. It's crazy. I don't even do football. I can't play football, but I can do organizations well. I can manage people well, and I've had the privilege of serving this. And on our vision, on our kind of annual days, I get to stand on the stage and inspire a community of 400 families in our city, about football. But for us, me and Annie have just taken our kingdom values. So Annie's she's, to be honest, the one that's grown the club. So she's the development officer in the club. But we've simply taken, as people say, no, we're not a Christian club, but, because no one else would think that, but we run it on Christian values, on kingdom values. People don't know that, but like some of the giving we've had, this fund that you've given to that grew up to 23,000 so far, has been football friends from Cambridge, from the football club, following us on Facebook, say, yeah, we'll give. Like, yeah. We had a refugee kid playing on we had a Syrian family move into Cambridge, and he was passionate for their son to play football. So the club we said, well, let's start a fund in the club to help them as a family. And we had vouchers going, and we got him a new kit and trainers. And so so suddenly, like, you can create organizations along kingdom values. And then we're running a parenting course, right? And I go, look at Annie, why don't we invite all the football club to the parenting course? And they trust you, Anya, because they believe in you, and you're running the parenting course. So suddenly we start having families from the football club coming to the parenting course. Now, we haven't seen anyone saved yet, but it's influencing. And it's about bringing the kingdom and being who we are. So being an inspirer in the church, we can be inspirers in our communities. If you're an apostle in the church, you can be an apostle for your community. You can sit with people, the people of power in your community, and get people together for good cause. And we've just got to break ourselves out of that mindset that the kingdom is just for in the church and start being kingdom influencers. And so that responsiveness, I love Jesus you can, what's God sparking in you? I love how Mark 10:49, Jesus heard that cry of blind Bartimaeus, son of David, and he responded. And I would say, what are you hearing? What are you hearing? Just don't hear the songs on Sundays. Hear the heart cry in the community. And where do we respond? Hear, what are you seeing? Wake up. Let's not live in our nice little Christian middle-class white bubbles. What's really going on? Jesus saw, he heard, he moved, he responded, he was present, he was in context of where people were at. And then they get him with look at Luke 13:10, when Jesus heals this bound woman who's been bound by an evil spirit for maybe 18 years. And all the religious people could get upset about was that Jesus had done this on the Sabbath. They were more concerned about their church operation than they were about the need of this woman that was released, unbound. And we're more concerned about getting church right than we are about people getting right with God. And we have to shift because Jesus is here. And this is what Jesus is about. And it's where he is and would have been. And this is where the church has to be. And what was amazing was, bound in her disability, bound by her poverty, bound by society for her illness being a sin, bound by Satan for 18 years, excluded by the Pharisees and the church, as it were, Jesus came and he healed her. He touched her, it says. He reached out and touched her, and she was unbound. And it wasn't just physically unbinding. Because of that, her relationships were healed. Her spirit was healed. She could begin to work again. She could begin to be part of society again. There was a fully orbed restoration of both spirit and body. And we see the manifesto of Luke 4 it's the whole person that Jesus came to save. And it's really interesting. I'll throw this out. In the resurrection, it wasn't just Jesus' spirit that was resurrected. It was his body that was resurrected. And it's like when at the fall, the physical world and the spiritual that were one got separated. But when at the resurrection of Jesus, the veil that got torn in two, and the good news is that God's space and our space is coming back to one again. And that is the message that's the hope of the gospel. Because out of heaven will come a new heaven, and it will descend onto earth, and there'll be a reconnecting back together again. So it's not just about getting our souls to heaven. It's about God taking you, our society, and beginning to put Humpty back together again, how it was always meant to be. Woo! New heaven, new earth. But the problem was the Jewish mindset expected the resurrection was meant to happen at the end of time, but Jesus got resurrected before the end of time. That screwed everything up, and eternity began to pour into the present. The kingdom began to come on earth as it is in heaven, and the two are beginning to connect back together again. Woo! Woo! That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And it's not some dream of some utopia here on earth or some unreality. Because we know that Jesus said that actually in the last days, the darkness will get darker. But what? The light will get lighter. And this is where the gospel is not retreating. The kingdom is advancing, and you get to be on the front line of this mission. Are you excited? Because I am. Oh, God, I just preached myself into revival here. This is exciting. Woo! And you see, Jesus' resurrection, he was eating fish, for crying out loud, after his resurrection. And they could touch his body. And you see, John 3:16 said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son." Now, if you look at that word world, it's actually the word cosmos. And I looked into it one day, and it means creation. It's the order of everything. It's the way society works. It's the way that human relationships work. It's the totality of everything. Not just your soul did Jesus die for. He's an artist that created this amazing piece of artwork. If you've invested your life into it, you just go, oh, well, never mind. Humanity took the aerosol can and just went blah over my creation. Never mind. I'll just create a new one. No, that word new isn't to throw away the old thing, but it is to renew. So God is going to come back for what he originally loved and created, because as an artist, he has got a strong relationship to that canvas and what he put on it. He's passionate about you and your wholeness. He's passionate about your community and its wholeness. Because one day before the throne, there will be Russians, there will be Greeks, there will be Afghans, there will be maybe the British will be allowed in. I don't know. If Jesus is more generous with us than we are generous with our foreign policy and border controls. But, before the throne, all humanity will come back to one. Oh, and it's a new heaven and a new earth. And this is just the beginning, folks. It really is just the beginning. So, none of today's been in my notes. But Jesus heals a bound woman. And he loves, and he restores. So, we need to be responsive. So we need to have confidence in our message, number one. And that's what John Conrath is restoring, firing in you. So get to those sessions if you can. Catch something from John. Be responsive. Where, God, are you sparking something in my world? What are you doing? Thirdly, whatever it takes. Do whatever it's going to take, and it will take sacrifice. I started on Wednesday night this last week, we started a small group, a missional small group on this new housing development in Cambridge. And we opened the scriptures around Acts 2, 42 to 47. And we said, God, that's the kind of community we want to be here. But then someone just said, that's amazing, but can you imagine how costly that would be? Are we really up for what the early church was really like? But do you know what? I wonder whether there is a revival of compassion going on in our country that would just connect with the message of the kingdom. Because 200,000 castles, British castles, have said that they are willing to put down their drawbridge to let the foreigner come and live in our houses. And we know from 17th century poet that a British person's home is their castle. So therefore we don't let people in. But we have. Our country has been moved. And people are now at Radio 4 phone-in programs. I'm hearing people saying, well, look, we learned how to care through COVID. We were sharing meals on the doorsteps with each other. We could now do compassion. Why would we not do it with some displaced Europeans? We do this stuff. And so suddenly something of a kingdom value. Yes, it's not under the banner of the church, but is something of the kingdom being birthed in our country. And we need to tap into that and to be part of that, because is God doing something new? And on that border, in the face of unparalleled sheer terror, I have also seen some tiny acts of incredible kindness. And we turned up down there, and there was a couple from Bristol, not believers, Lee and Stephen. And they had been sitting at home in Bristol, watching the TV, and said, we've got to go. So she gave up her job. They fundraised some money among friends on Just Give. Yeah. And they just jumped in the car and they drove. And they ended up on the border in Przemyśl. Lee was the first person that greeted us with our aid vans that night outside that Tesco's. And she said, right, she spoke English, so that was good for most of us. And it was all right. But we were like, okay, so come in. Right, so you need to volunteer as volunteers. You can go and sign up, take your passports in. You're going to be volunteering, aren't you? Tim and Andy, how long are you here for? Great, right, sign up for a shift. We're like, okay, we came on. And as I was there, I was like, Lee, how long have you been here? Oh, about 2 weeks. So who's looking after you? Where are you staying? Oh, yeah, no one's looking after us. We're just volunteers from Norway, from wherever, and we've just collaborated to come down and help this frontline situation. So where are you staying? Because I'm thinking we couldn't get accommodation in Przemyśl. It was all booked, so we had to stay with some friends. And she goes, well, you see those tents out in the car park? That's where we've been staying for. But Lee, it's -16 at night. I said, yeah, that's right. And I'm like, the sacrifice. And I'm like, so have you sort of ventured beyond this car park? She said, no, like every day, like we're just here. And like Stephen's there with a bucket, just cleaning the floors. And then you kind of have all the people coming in. You had the JWs coming in with their jackets. You had the Mormons. You had some of the Mercy Mission people coming in with their jackets on, looking like they've got the business. And I don't know what they were doing. They were standing around looking important on some aisle, but there was not a flipping mop in their hands. But Stephen, not a religious do-gooder, just someone with compassion, was there mopping the floors. And I looked at both. So it's Stephen with you. And that heart to serve and to sacrifice is where the church needs to be, which goes back to the beginning, that is just because all those 10 lepers didn't get healed didn't mean that Jesus wouldn't serve them. And we have to serve just because. No expectations. And I know that's scary. And I know that's counter-Christian. Because we had to be putting bums on seats, right? But I don't know. I think bums will come on seats. But we just had to do it the right way around and trust God in it and not human manufacture through it. And I think this, whatever it takes. And do you remember Nemo, the Finding Nemo film, when all those fish are caught in that net, and I think it was Dora in there as well, and they're trapped. And they're like, what's going to happen? How are we going to get out? And then suddenly all these tiny little fish decide to swim in the same direction. And oh my goodness, and I wanted to find the clip to show it, but it's crazy. They basically erupt out against the containment they were trying, and the evil that was being compelled against them. And I just want to say, when a million people, when lots of small nobodies that on their own stack up to nothing, and that's quite frankly what I am, it's what you are. But when we start doing it together, as a whole, millions of Christians in this nation start swimming in the same direction, just what can happen. And I think we're moving away from the era of the Christian celebrity platforms to a movement of a faceless army that will just love, that will go. And that is when the gospel and the kingdom will break out. And that night we just took Lee and Stephen for a meal. We just found a cracking, the Polish food was amazing. We took them to the best restaurant in town. Said, guys, we just want to say thank you for what you've done. And we had an evening of just sharing our story with them. And I just praying that some of the seeds of the kingdom we were sowing there would do something. But I saw a sacrifice that night that inspired me as a Christian. And it's there. So being prepared just to serve. And then, so we're talking about being confident about our message, being responsive, doing whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. And being prepared for that. Because I think people are tired of Christians coming in as like God's power, our man of our power for the hour, and like, whoa. And then it gets tough and we're off. But that's what I like about local church. We're present day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out. And your presence begins to build trust. And trust begins to build credibility. And credibility and trust opens doors. And I've had the privilege of working with Ian Rawley for just seeing the planting of a church into a whole new part of Cambridge. Just so I'll just go through some of these slides. Oh yeah, here we are. So we can get to Cambridge. Eddington, this whole brand new part of Cambridge which is being built. It was on my running route. You may not see that I'm a runner at the moment. I'm on a relapse, and my 19-year-old was like, Dad, get your body back in shape. So I don't stand before you today in the real me. But this, funny enough, this map was one of my running routes and my prayer routes. And as it was being built, I said, God, this is ready for a church. There's brand new people moving in here. The people aren't brand new, but it's a brand new place being built. And just because you build new houses, do not be fooled that you automatically get community. But the developers are selling dreams that if you move to these houses, you will be part of a brand new life and a community. And so, over the last couple of years, Ian Rawley's church, New Life Church, has repositioned itself from, you see the top, there's the A14, and there's a settlement of houses beyond that top road. That's Histon. The church has moved out of Histon, and we are now focused completely on Eddington and Darwin Green. And we've lost some major people from the church because of it. Really good givers have decided, no, we're not up for this. But there's a group that's come together and said, we want to see the kingdom come here. And I wanted to say that it's been, that this act of service. And I said to the guys, I said, look, when we go, they said, Tim, how do we go? I said, we go to serve. Literally, we're going to go and serve this community. And so we've started for 3 years now. On a Monday morning, we've been running Eddie's Cafe, and this was like the celebration morning. And just week in, week out, creating a simple space for people from all around the world to come and meet people and to connect on this new housing area. It's part of the university, so there's academics from all over the world and other partners. And do you know what? That act of service of people volunteering on a Monday morning for 3 hours has opened doors for us. When we first arrived, the university said, no, you can't hire anything because we cannot accept a Christian group. We are a humanist organization. If we say yes to you, we've got to say yes to the Muslims, the Jews, the Hindus, and everything, and we can't be dealing with that. We're a secular development. And so Ian and I are like, this is God's called us here. So we've been praying and saying, God, break through. And the breakthrough has come through service. So we now have a seat at the cultural table of the whole place. It's just the doors are opening. And just last Sunday, and we're now meeting in the primary school on Sundays, which is, or the church are meeting now on Sundays. And a place that we never thought we'd ever be allowed in because of that trust that's been built. Doors open. And it's not flashy. It's just loving week in, week out, being present, not being weird, being normal, be yourself. It's incredible how people like genuineness. And over the road, the Hyatt has opened up. And we realized we weren't doing our own catering after the service, so we just now pour into the Hyatt after the Sunday service, and we take over the coffee place. And it's just building community. And so because of the Eddie's Cafe, I said you have to bring people into faith spaces. So that Eddie's Cafe is completely neutral. We do talk about faith if things come up, but it's a partnership with Eddington. But we did something called Eddie's Cafe. Actually, that was the Christmas one. I didn't take a photo of the Easter one we did the other Sunday. But it was incredible. Anya was sharing about Jesus for the first time with a Hindu lady who had never heard about Jesus and never heard about the resurrection. There was a man from Iran, an academic in neuroscience, and we had some of the team were telling the Easter story to their children, or the Easter account through creative storytelling. And Hamid was sitting there on the edge, and he was like, wow. And then at the end, after the story, he said, what happened after the resurrection? And he was like, he was laughing up. And so we're basically on that estate. We've just started our first small group, and Hamid next week is going to come, and we've said we want to open this open table where people can come. We're going to open the scripture on one week a month, and then on the other one is we're going to eat food together. And we're just going to see, like, where does God take all these relationships? And it's small things, but it's being saying, God, can you minister into a place? And he really can. So this is all to say, in Luke 10:5, Jesus sent out the 12, and this is really, he said, go and eat at their table. Notice the commands that Jesus gave. Pray for their needs, and then he said, proclaim the kingdom. Notice the pattern. We say, proclaim the kingdom, pray for their needs, and when they're clean enough and holy enough, we'll allow you to come in and eat. We've totally put it the wrong way around. Jesus says, go and eat at their table. Some of it might feel a little bit difficult, awkward. Having coffee for the first time in the house of some gay friends, well, that was weird. But God just gave me a love. It's like, okay, I need to go and drink at their table. But then begin to pray for needs. Or a meet needs to serve without fear. And then earn the respect to begin to share the why. And folks, it will come. God will, and as Paul prayed, pray that God would open up doors of opportunity for the gospel. And this is what God is calling us to be, and being mission ready. Understand the power of serving without an agenda. And then lastly, know your call and sphere. Paul knew he was called to the Gentiles. Peter knew he was called to the Jews. Which bit of housing estate is God causing you to love? Your village, your neighbors. 3 key students. What is God sparking for you? What's the beginning of a mission that God's got for you in your life? Guys, I think that's what I feel the Lord wanted us to inspire us in this morning. So